Just wanted to, give an acknowledgement for everyone who did the pre-work. Again, I feel like when pre-work happens, I get the most benefit because I get to hear all of or read all of your your fellowship, and and I feel like the Lord just speaks that way. And again, I almost feel like for everyone who did the pre-work, we're kind of done. We don't need to we don't need to do too much, and something's there in your spirit about this. And we're only going to have pre-work 3 times through the whole semester, and then and then you may ask, why did we have it twice in a row? And we had it twice in a row because of the content of these times. I wanted one of the pre-works to be us considering Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and their experience in light of our experience. And then I wanted another time to because this Exodus portrait is so important, and I hope it can kind of be like in our being, and we could all have the Exodus, kind of stamped in us. And as we grow in the Lord, and even as a church, as churches, we would also grow into this experience. So appreciate all of the efforts that were made. And I would say like maybe about high 20s, 25, 27 people did the pre-work, which is very good. And praise the Lord, for that. And we hope these things can be in us and be our life experience. And so then we will not have pre-work until, actually, I think it's going to be class 8. And so we'll have a number of weeks where you will just have the outline to read and be in the verses and the quotes and things like that, but there won't be pre-work until class 8. Okay, well, I want to talk about the Exodus, and this is a very special, kind of like overview. And I think it should be special to us because kind of the theme tonight should be like my Exodus or our Exodus. And I think it should be special to us, and also because it's special in the Bible. The Exodus story is repeated in the Old and New Testaments and in our lives. And I gave you that kind of the list of like supplemental readings. And I feel like if I had like a lot of time, extra time, I would want to spend time in each of these chapters and just find out like what angle is brought up in each of the instances. But you can just see, like, at the end of Moses' life, he reviews Deuteronomy 32. At the end of Joshua's life, he reviews this. In Psalm 78, when David becomes, anointed, this is reviewed. The whole history is reviewed. Psalm 105, 106, 136, Ezekiel 20, when the people were in Babylon, like they reviewed the Exodus. And Nehemiah 9, when they came back from Babylon, they reviewed the Exodus. And even in Acts 7, with Stephen's message, he kind of reviews this. And then other chapters just like heavily rely on this. And it's almost like God made everything so perfect in this instance that it's like that's a marker for your life. And it's like, the portrayal of the world is our experience of the world. The portrayal of coming out of the world is our experience. The Passover is Christ. And we go through the failures are all lessons for us. And I hope that we can all have like our Exodus story and kind of grow into that. And and I even think sometimes with this whole thing, like, Moses hit the rock twice. He hit the rock twice, and God's like, no, I can't have you enter the land, and where my approval is shown, that you hit the rock twice, because I really wanted a good picture of Christ dying once on the cross, once. And so, that's just a sign, like the whole thing is arranged in a perfect way. And then our experience is mapped onto that. And even, there are hints, Matthew 2:15, Jesus, when he comes out of Egypt, Matthew says this was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophets. He quotes Hosea 11:1, out of Egypt I called my son. And so even Jesus' life is like, foreshadowed in the experiences of Israel in all of its journeys with God. And so it's a really important thing. And I hope we can kind of like be inspired, be directed, be touched by the whole story. And as we read these chapters in the Pentateuch, we would just realize this is me, or this is us. And I don't just come up with this because that's the theme of this class. Actually, Paul does. He says, I don't want you to be unaware in 1 Corinthians 10 that our fathers, they were all under the cloud. They were baptized in Moses. They ate spiritual food. They drank the same spiritual drink. And then look at verse 6. These things happened as examples for us. So Paul's like, look at those people. Those are our examples. Again, 10:11, 1 Corinthians. Now these things happened to them as an example. They were written for our instruction. And then Paul just assumes that like the different, stages of Israel are the believers' experience. Like look at in 1 Corinthians 5, verse 7, for Christ our Passover has been sacrificed. So when you're reading Exodus 12, and you realize that's the Passover of the children of Israel. Actually, think about this. That is my experience. That is an experience of Christ. And you can just see how thing after thing, item after item unfolds. And so I will not read all of these quotes, but I just want to highlight the first sentence here. And, you could go back or whatever, read this later. Paul's intent is clear, however, which is to establish the parallel between the experience of ancient Israel in her salvation from the Egyptians and the believer's deliverance from the bondage of sin, symbolized in Christian baptism. It's like Paul's intent was clear. Like, I want to look at this parallel. And so I hope we can all have that kind of experience. And it's amazing how relevant this old story is to our life. So I want to go through station by station and highlight those things that may be inspired by the Spirit to impress us in our walk, out of the world and serving God. The first one is the oppression in Egypt. Egypt is a picture of the world. And this is what the world says in Exodus 1:10, let's deal wisely with them, or else they're gonna cause us trouble. And so in 11, they appointed taskmasters over them to afflict them with hard labor. And they built for Pharaoh storage cities, Pithom and Ramses. So the Egyptians enslaved the Israelites that were there because they were afraid that they were going to cause trouble, and they just wanted to be afflicted with hard labor. And let me tell you, this is the experience of the world. The world would see a believer, even maybe many times like a young believer who has like a lot of potential for God. And it's like, no, I just want to afflict that person with hard labor so they don't cause any trouble. And then in that, consuming, occupied state, you just feel I'm trapped. I am enslaved. And then this is the slavery that they experienced there. They were required to do more, or to do the equal amount with fewer resources. Each person had quota of bricks to make. You are no longer to give the people straw to make bricks as previously. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. But the quota of bricks which they were making previously, you shall impose on them. Do not reduce any of it, because they are lazy. Therefore, they cry out, let us go and sacrifice to our God. Let the labor be heavier on the men, and let them work at it so that they will pay no attention to false words. How true this is with an experience in the world today. Every job you get, you eventually realize, I need to keep the same quota, but I have fewer resources. And then every boss wants to get more out of you. This is a picture of the way the world works. And it's the way Egypt worked, and it's the way the world today works. And the whole point of that is that it would prevent us from going and sacrificing to our God. And the world would occupy, use up, distract, cause more distress. And you realize, oh, I've wasted my whole life building treasure cities. Storage cities for Pharaoh. This was Israel in the world. And that's where we start. And God gave plagues. And I don't want to spend too much time, but I do want to spend enough time on this. So I'm going to shorten my time for some other areas because of this. But each of the plagues, the 10 plagues, there were 10 plagues. And they were, if you look at them, you'll see how they just gave like a certain kind of like aspect of the world. It unveiled it. It taught what the world is. The first one, the Nile River. That was the source of everything in Egypt. All the agriculture, all the wealth, everything was sourced by the Nile. And the first plague is Moses struck the water that's in the Nile, and it turned to blood. And the fish died, etc. And then it turned to blood. And it was just a sign that like the root of this system is death. And you look at, back in the beginning, Cain killed Abel. Then he went and built cities. You look at the Roman, myth of founding. It was fratricide. Romulus killed Remus, established Rome. You look at any nation established through bloodshed, and then you just look at the whole system, and you realize like there's something that is the source of death in this, and it comes out in the flower of the world. The next 3 plagues, it's like frogs. And then strike the dust of the earth, it becomes gnats. And then if you don't let my people go, I'm just going to send swarms of flies. And I don't want to get into all the details, but these plagues, they're just not like life-threatening. They're not life-threatening, but they are very bothersome. And if you look at the state of the world, you just realize there is nothing easy in the world. You sow or you plant a field, thorns come up. And you just like, and then you have to get rid of the thorns. And then to do that, you have to buy a certain thing. And then this is like the world system, like it's all a bunch of frogs. And those frogs came up and they went into all the houses, and even, they would open their ovens. And you know what was in that oven? A frog. So before they they made their bread, they just have to take this is a frog. What's a frog doing in my oven? And they have to take it out. And, the gnats, they just were there. It says, just bothersome. If you've ever been surrounded by gnats, it's like all of the dust, which is supposed to grow things. It just became things that were bothersome. And then the swarms of flies, they were probably biting flies. Psalm says they consumed them. So you can just think about a lot of those kinds of things. It's just a sign, like it's just you got to get insurance for your car. You got to get the extended warranty for your dishwasher, all of those things. And then you just realize, oh, so many things in the world are just that way. And then it gets worse. The fifth plague is a pestilence on livestock, which are in the field. That's on the horses, the donkeys, the camels, the herds, the flocks. And this is a picture of just like, those things. F.B. Hull says that's like human greed. You look at a horse in the Bible, and then it's like, oh, I can do things that are, independent of God, and I will accumulate horses as kind of a show. And then you see that, yes, in the world, there's accumulation of things. And then you know what happens? A pestilence happens. And then you just see that thing withered away. What is that? Something of the characteristic of the world. Anyone who loves riches will pierce them. The love of money is a root of all evil. People who pursue after that, pierce themselves through with many sorrows. Why? Because of the fifth plague. You realize oh, there's something good there, but there's pestilence. And then, then it's just evaporated. And then there's fine dust. This is plague 6. And that dust is the dust from the kiln where they did the pottery baking, or possibly the brick baking. And then that just, Moses threw that up, and then it just became boils on everyone throughout the whole land. And you just realize oh, there's something in the world. When I am working in that way, that dust gets on me, and then something comes out of me. It's like a boil. And then in Leviticus, the same word, Leviticus 13, there could be leprosy there. And you just realize oh, wow, something was in the world with that work. And then it made me ooze this thing. And I realized oh, that's what the system is. And then there's hail. Heavens should bless with rain. But here, heavens don't bless this. No, there's hail. It destroys the sycamore, destroys the barley, destroys the fruit-bearing trees. And you just and then even hail and fire, according to the Psalms. And you just realize there is a lot of destruction, and these things can go just like that. And then after the hail, what was left of the green things? There's this mighty plague of locusts, and you just realize the whole world can be consumed in just such a short amount of time, all of your labor. And then out of the ninth plague is a darkness. And look at how Exodus 21 describes it, even a darkness which may be felt. And you just realize oh, there's something so dark here. It's so dark. And the darkness is such that they could feel it. What is the world? It's that kind of darkness. And then finally, about midnight, I'm going to go into the midst of Egypt. All the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die. From the firstborn of the Pharaoh who sits on his throne, etc. And you just realize, you know what? The whole thing, they gave their lives for that. And the result was death of the most precious thing, the firstborn. And you look at all these plagues and you just realize this is a picture of what the world is. And the Israelites were just longing. I need to be free. I need to be free. And so the freedom is Christ. And that's the first experience that people have. They're just I just see it's a frog, it's lice, it's pestilence, it's darkness. There was hail, then there were locusts. The whole thing is just tearing out what is most precious to me. I need something more. God, please deliver me. And then God says to the congregation of Israel, on the 10th of this month, each one take a lamb for themselves and their households. You take the lamb. And when the Lord went through the land of Egypt to kill all the firstborn, 13, the blood of that lamb will be a sign for you on the houses where you live. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. And you just realize with Christ, my life is no longer consumed by everything that those plagues taught me. I am free, free from the world. I am out. Thank the Lord for the Lamb. And we know from 1 Corinthians, the Passover Christ. This is Christ. What does Christ do? First of all, prevents the firstborn from being slaughtered by God as he judges the evil of the world. When they crossed the Red Sea, which is a picture of baptism, that's in 1 Corinthians 10, it's very interesting, it's like when Pharaoh had let the people go, this Exodus 13:17, God didn't lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines. And here, there's a little map here, like, if they were here in this city, they could have just gone up this way. And here's the Mediterranean Sea. And then, the good land is just kind of right over here. And, it was so near, but God thought this, you know what? They might change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. So he took them down south and they crossed the Red Sea. It might be here. It might be here. And they crossed the Red Sea in this marvelous way. And he wanted there to be a strong, statement of leaving. And they would feel like, I can't just go back. And that is what a true experience of baptism is. Like, I cannot easily go back. I can't. There was a dunking in the water. The sons of Israel walked on dry land through the midst of the sea. Water's a wall to them on their right and left. And then the Lord saved Israel on that day. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. There's a huge statement. And it was much more than just if they had gone the way through the land of the Philistines. And that baptism was a picture of their leaving the world in a strong, solid way. And Pharaoh, his armies were chasing, and then they were dead on the seashore. And there was like a I am not going back. And then we know that it's not just going to be a peaceful life. After they cross the Red Sea, there will be war. And I'll tell you this, in your Christian life, there will be war, there will be fighting, there will be all kinds of things. And you might ask, can I just go back? It's kind of hard. Maybe it's so hard. Maybe I think, maybe it was wrong all the time. Then you look back at the sea and you're like, no, I can't, because the sea doesn't open up again. It only opened up once. And then God's like, that's my provision. You would have a strong, solid release. And I'll go a little faster now. I'm amazed at this verse. When Moses is singing about the sea, covering all of burying or drowning the Egyptians, drowning Pharaoh himself. He gives why? He says this in Exodus 15:17. So this is before a lot of stuff happened. You will bring them and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance. That is Mount Zion. That's Jerusalem right there. The place, O Lord, which you have made for your dwelling. The sanctuary. That is the temple. That is the prophecy of the temple, O Lord, which your hands have established. He's talking about something that God is going to do. And then the people are just realizing, oh, wait a minute, we're going to go have a feast. That's true. But that is only going to be a certain step in the future. I could tell you why we're here. Why Israel? Why God? Why out of Egypt? Why in this long journey? Why? Because I'm going to the mountain of God's inheritance. I'm going to the place which the Lord has made for his dwelling, the sanctuary, which his hands has established. And I think of so many people are in so many different churches, and they have no idea why they're there. They don't know why they're there. They don't know, what are we doing here? What is the point? And this was not the case at all with Israel. They knew why they're there. And then if you know why you're there, you can go through so many hardships, so much war, that and still realize, no, there's something higher. There's a mountain of God's inheritance. I want to get there. I want to get there. And they were imbued with purpose. And when I see a believer, I heard one believer say, like, oh, I meet in this church because wow, the community is so great. I have no confidence. But if somebody says this, I meet in this church because I see a vision of what God is doing, I have a lot of confidence. And when you look at the children of Israel, you say, oh, if they had ears to hear this word that Moses said, even in Exodus 15, right after the baptism, they realized, I know why I'm baptized, because God will bring me and plant me in the mountain of his inheritance. He will plant us. And then there will be a dwelling, a sanctuary, and it'll be very, very clear that you realize, like, I know why I'm here. I know why I am meeting in this church. I know why I'm struggling. I know why I am like able to go through all the things that God is leading us through. Why? Because I see the purpose. Okay. After that, they learned to eat manna. And this is, I wish we had like nine times just on this, just on this, all these different things. But manna. When the layer of dew evaporated, behold, on the surface of the wilderness, there was a fine flake-like thing, fine as the frost on the ground. When the sons of Israel, they said to one another, saw it, they said to one another, what is it? Which in Hebrew is manna. For they did not know what it was. And Moses says to them, it is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat. And I think this is a really important lesson for every believer. Eat manna every day. Eat manna every day. I don't know how many times, and this is reflected in your pre-work, many people said, I didn't quite know what was up with God, what the Christian life was like. I didn't quite know how to what was going on, or how to even live for God, until I began to eat every day. And there was like and then there was they didn't eat on the Sabbath, or that they didn't collect manna on the Sabbath, but they gathered. The one who gathered a lot didn't have extra. The one who gathered little had no lack. Every day they had their supply. And if you want to know really what's going on with God, you have to have manna every day. So there were people that wrote on the pre-work, yeah, when I read the Bible every day, then I began to like advance. Oh, when I touched the Lord every day, it's manna every day. And that's what God instituted. And and then he instituted that manna so that he would test them, and he would like direct them, cause them to wake up early, cause them, we'll find out later, don't sacrifice your food to goat demons. Stop that. Stop. Just eat the manna. Just eat the manna. And their lives just became more regular. And I have seen this, like, people change when their lives become regular and they begin to eat manna every day. They collect it, with the Sabbath exception. Every day they eat it. Every day they have a sufficient supply. And they also drank water from the rock. Just to say, what a scene. behold, I, Moses, that's the law, will stand before you on the rock at Horeb. We know from the New Testament, the rock is Christ. And you shall, oh, sorry, God is standing before Moses on the rock at Horeb. And then you, Moses, shall strike the rock, that is Christ, and water will come out of it, that the people may drink. And let me just give you that scene. God is looking at Christ on the cross. And then Moses, representing the law, will strike him in judgment. And then out of that side of Christ will flow blood and water. And then you get the picture. You get the picture. It's so perfect. It's just so perfect. And then the people drank from the rock. And Paul says that rock is Christ. They learned to fight. They learned to fight. And I appreciate some people, like when I asked, like, can you choose 4? They chose the fighting one. The fighting. Praise the Lord. That's fighting. So there's a nation called Amalek. There's Exodus 17. And they just started to like pick off the stragglers, like attack the stragglers in the nation. And so Moses said to Joshua, choose men for us and go out, fight against Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So Moses was there. And then beside him were 2 old people, Aaron and Hur. They're all old. Those are the old people holding up the staff. And then Joshua is a young guy. And then he's with the other people. And then he's fighting against Amalek. And you see this whole nation working together to fight against Amalek. And then Amalek is a picture of flesh. And then we don't have time to go through proofs of that or whatever. Just you can look up Amalek. All the times it's mentioned. It's like the fleshly way of serving the Lord, or the flesh with its works of sin, etc. It's a picture of that. And we need to learn how to fight that. If you look at a group of believers, you know what they need to do? Fight Amalek. You know, later on, we're going to see, at the end, we're going to see a fight with kings Sihon and Og. And that fight with them will cause them the Israelites to possess the land, to gain something of Christ. With the fight against Amalek, you don't possess anything. You don't possess anything after you win against Amalek. You never take their territory. You never do anything. You just fight. And this is an important thing. Young men, you need to fight against flesh. and old men, you need to fight against flesh. Oh, young women, you need to fight against flesh. Old women, you need to sisters, whatever. Brothers, sisters, old brothers, whatever. And then you need to fight against the flesh. And we fight together. And then you just realize, like, that victory is not for possession. It's just for victory and freedom, so you don't get overcome. And you realize this will never stop. Not until the Lord comes back. The Lord has sworn the Lord will have war against Amalek from generation to generation. And you just realize, like, we need to learn how to fight. He established a kingdom. Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of 50s, and of 10s. They judged people at all times. The difficult dispute they would bring to Moses, but every minor dispute they themselves would judge. In this stage, God just like raised up judges, and they were capable deciders, capable of discerning, capable of with an ability to see things in the right way. And you just realize, like, there's some kind of maturity developing. And I would say that it's a stage. This maybe is a boring stage. It's not as exciting as water from the rock or crossing the Red Sea. But how much the churches need this. The churches need this. Like able, capable people. Paul says, don't you know you're going to judge angels? So isn't there someone there who can discern this? And it's a stage. It's a stage. Here, they received the promises of God to be his special people. You yourselves have seen, now they're at Mount Sinai. You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And this is important. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. God just bore them on eagle's wings. And you just realize, oh, what an exodus born by God. It wasn't that they just left the world of their own accord. No, there was a cloud, there was a pillar of fire, there was an opening of the sea for them to walk through, there was a manna that came down from heaven, there was a water from the rock. And then you just look back on that, it's like God did it. God did it. Maybe an Israelite would say, it should have never worked. It should have never worked. Like that's kind of like what it is. Sometimes I look at the church, it's like, it should have never worked. Lord, you got the wrong people. You got the wrong people, not us. It should have never worked. And then the Lord's like, no, I just bore you on eagle's wings. And then I want you to be my own possession. The most special thing that there is about you is that you're mine. Not what you do, but that you're mine. You're just mine. And I'm going to make you kingdom of priests. And then, maybe previously you had occupation brickmaker, occupation baker, occupation gardener, occupation fisherman. Right now, all your main occupation is going to be serving me. That's the main occupation. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests. I will provide for you, bearing you on eagle's wings. You will be a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. God just says, like, I am with you. Oh, what a marvelous picture of their journey. And then they got married. They got married to God. He took the book of the covenant. Covenant is like a marriage covenant, like that. That's the same word, covenant, that is used to describe marriage in Malachi. And they read it in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. We will be obedient. We won't talk about whether that came true or not. We know it didn't, but let's just roll with it. So Moses took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, behold, the blood of the covenant, which the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. And then, God speaks to Jeremiah in 2:2. He records it. I remember concerning you, Israel, the devotion of your youth. Look at this. The love of your betrothals. You're following after me in the wilderness through a land not sown. As they were walking through the wilderness, God was like, we're married. Oh, this is so great. This is the love of their betrothals. And you just see their relationship between God's people with God himself, between God's people and God himself. And, I would just say, like, coming out of the world is great. It's great. But if you've maybe some people never had the experience of being that much damaged by the world, and then they might be and they just started following God, and then they might be kind of jealous of other people who were saying, like, I was about to take the drugs for the 60th time, and I was just about to like kill myself or whatever, and then God saved me, and it was a glorious thing. And I don't have that kind of testimony. I just kind of always just like the Lord, well, it's not about coming out of Egypt that is like the main meat of this. That's like the start. what is the main meat of the Christian life? The marriage covenant with the Lord. And that is so much richer, because why? You can only come out of Egypt, certain number of times, but you can always be married with the Lord, and that marriage can increase. I remember concerning you, the devotion of your youth, the love of your betrothals. And what God is doing is developing in his people a love for him, and the vibrancy of that relationship with him. And so if you see the whole picture, then is like, I brought you out of Egypt. I did all of this so we can be married. And you realize, oh, I am in a relationship with God. It's like, yeah, you're my peculiar possession. It doesn't matter like how capable you are. Just the only thing that matters is you care about me. The only thing that matters is you care about me. And then when that has a problem, then we'll see how there are problems. But it doesn't matter how capable they are. The only thing that matters is like, you are my possession. And God just loved this nation. And he remembered the devotion of your youth, the love of your betrothals. And this is where he made that covenant. He wrote the tablets, and I'll go through these quickly because we're going to cover them in much more detail in the future. But he wrote the tablets, the 10 Commandments. And it's like a picture of who God is. You could look at the commandments as like his purity, his honoring of human beings, and his intention. And you could also look at them as like a marriage contract. Instead of saying, you shall have no other gods before me. That's commandment number 1. It's kind of like this. If a husband marries a wife, and then the wife would say to the husband, you shall have no other women besides me. And then the husband would be like, yes, that's right. Don't take my name in vain. Don't make an idol. All of these things are just like, and they just be in this, and they're shaped by that in so many wonderful ways. He gave them the tabernacle, and according to all that I am going to show you as a pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furniture, just so you shall construct it. And then, erect the tabernacle according to its plan, which you have been shown in the mountain. And he instituted the priesthood, and that tabernacle, which we'll get to in much more detail. In the tabernacle, there was an inner room called the Holy of Holies. And God would commune with the high priest at this time once a year. But it was a sign. I'm with you. I'm with you. And the law could be seen as like his requirements, but the tabernacle could be seen as his grace and his relationship. He gave the tabernacle, he gave the priesthood, which could usher the people into fellowship with God. And, when he was going about this marriage relationship, God was just kind of saying, like, I just want you to be with me. And yes, if you sin, I have provision. If you're not consecrated, I have provision. If you need a wholesome peace, I have provision for that. If you did a trespass, I have provision. But what I want you to do is come, have fellowship. And he even instituted with those people just like a life of enjoying. 3 times a year, celebrate a feast to me. And, and if you look at a lot of the sacrifices, some people read about these sacrifices and they just say like, oh, there's so many rules. I can't take all these rules. But if you get into the rules, which we will do that a little bit, you just realize like those sacrifices that are given at the feasts and other times are real provisions for enjoyment. For instance, look at 7:15. Leviticus 7:15. Now, as for the flesh of the sacrifice of his thanksgiving peace offerings, it shall be eaten on the day of his offerings. He shall not leave any of it over until morning. I'll just emphasize that one verse. So think about this. One person brings a bull for a peace offering. And then he does all of the requirements to present that bull to the Lord, putting the liver, the fat, all the fat of the tail, the proper entrails on the altar. And then the rest of it is for his consumption. And then you ask, like, how could a single individual eat an entire bull? And the answer is he or she cannot do that. You know what they have to do? They have to bring all of the people, whoever is clean in the temple area around, and they're just like, I'm having a peace offering. And then it just becomes this kind of celebration. And then God's like, I want you to have this kind of enjoyment. I want you to have this kind of enjoyment. Wouldn't it be great? Every church meeting is like this kind of enjoyment. A sister comes in, here's a peace offering, and then all the saints rush over to that sister because they're going to get a part of that peace offering too. And the brother's like, hey, I have a peace offering. And then all the saints, just rush over. And then, you just realize, like, God's thought for his people is marvelous. It's feasting, it's offering, and it's enjoying him in the tabernacle, in that marriage relationship with the Lord, where you just feel like, I am just full of an enjoyment of the presence of my husband. And what makes us so unique is that what? It's not what we can do. It is who we belong to. You are my treasured possession. Okay, well, it was a great idea. It was a great idea. And I just gave you all the positive points. And I kind of skipped over the failures. There were grumblings and okay, so we'll talk about some of these. There were actually like at least 10 times where they grumbled and they just, they even said multiple times, oh, I just wish we would just go back to Egypt. And, and so you can kind of see how in this life of the Exodus all the way to the land of Canaan, there's like two parts of us. One, I would say, is our spirit, led by our spirit, the spiritual man. And that spirit wants to go forward and wants to like be for God in all of these kind of ways. And then the other is something of our natural man, our natural consideration, our natural whatever. And we just hate it. That part just hates it. Because why? There's war, there's hardship, there's a requirement to trust, and it's just not easy to get through on that side. And so God brought the children of Israel, after he, gave them the law, the tabernacle, the priesthood at Sinai, he brought them to go into the land of Canaan. And they sent spies, 12 spies for 40 days. And then they told them, we went into the land where you sent us. It certainly does flow with milk and honey. This is its fruit. They brought examples of the fruit. Nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. And moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there, and they rejected going into the land. And the 10 spies who brought back this negative report won over the whole congregation. And God severely judged the people. All the men of war, 20 years old and older, would not enter the land, and they had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years total. And the Lord just said, like, how long will this people spurn me? How long? This is a very important verse. How long will they not believe in me, despite all the signs which I have performed in their midst? And That little word believe is like the indicator that that's what was required. Our spirit, by faith, apprehends God and stands with God, his word and his purpose, which even Moses said, I'll bring you to the mountain of his inheritance. How do you get there? By the Spirit. In the Spirit, God is our husband. In the Spirit, we are married to him. In the Spirit, we enjoy the feast. In the Spirit, all of those things. And if you have the enjoyment of by faith in the Spirit, then you realize there's a way forward. If not, then the people who live in the land are strong. The cities are fortified, very large, and you just feel a wasting away. And I won't go into the details of this, but there were a lot of rebellions. And Book of Numbers has a lot of different rebellions. There's Korah. They just said in verse 3 here of chapter 16, Numbers, they assembled together against Moses and Aaron and said, you have gone far enough. All the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is in their midst. So why do you exalt yourself above the assembly of the Lord? They're just so rebellious. In other words, why can't I also say something? Aren't I holy? But then the Lord chose Moses and Aaron, and they couldn't take it. They just could not take that. And how many people I've seen in the church side, they just can't take it. They can't take it. And then you just realize, like, wow, it's easy in spirit. Out of spirit, it's not easy at all. And so Moses just said, like, this is another one, but like just everyone put a rod there. And then the rod of Aaron for the house of Levi, after a night, sprouted, put forth buds, produced blossoms, bore ripe bottoms. All of the other rods were just sticks, dead sticks, which is what they were when they put them there. And then basically the Lord was saying, like, I'm speaking through Aaron. I'm speaking through Moses. How about you just listen to them? But there was a need for this kind of wasting away. And I feel like within us, there's also a need for like a wasting away of that part which cannot stand with God and with his purpose. And there's a need for a strengthening of the part that is able to stand with God, to enjoy the feast, to enjoy the tabernacle, to enjoy the offerings, to enjoy the manna, to enjoy the water out of the rock, and to enjoy living for God's purpose. And this happened, the wasting away happened in Deuteronomy 2:14. It's noted, now the time that it took for us to come from Kadesh, that's what happened here, until we crossed over the brook Zered, 38 years, until all the generation of the men of war perished from within the camp, as the Lord had sworn to them. Praise the Lord. I hope we all come to Zered. And after Zered, you just realize, like, oh, it's over. The part that needs to be wasted away is wasted away. And what happens after that? They begin to win. And Israel sent messenger to Sihon, king of the Amorites. They turned and went up by the way of Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, went out with his people for the battle at Edrei. But the Lord said, don't fear him, for I have given him into your hand and all his people in his land. And you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon. They killed him and his sons and all the people until there was no remnant left. And this is very important, they possessed his land. And so finally, after the brook Zered, then they come up and they fight against these two kings, Sihon and Og. And you know what they do? After they fight against those kings, they possess the land. When they fought against Amalek, there's no possession. They're just fighting. If you win against your flesh, there is no possession. I encourage you, win against your flesh, but you just realize there is no possession there. However, if you win against Sihon and Og, there's a possession. It's like, oh, I have something. I have something of the Lord. I have something of Christ. I have something of the Bible. I have something of the church. I have something of a ministry to help people. I have something of a knowledge of Christ. I've gained something. It's not just that I've won against the flesh, but it's like I have something of Christ. There's some capital that I have that I can possess and develop and grow, to grow the riches of Christ for his testimony, for his inheritance on the mountain. That is finally a fight that they were able to fight. And you just realize that's a victory. That was a real victory. And they're ready for Joshua. I've led you these 40 years in the wilderness. Moses says, look at this. Your clothes have not worn out. Your sandal has not worn out on your foot. You've not eaten bread, drunk wine, strong drink. And then Sihon and Og, we're defeated. And then, he ushers them over to Joshua in the final verse, Deuteronomy 31:7. Moses called to Joshua and said to him in the sight of all Israel, be strong and courageous, for you shall go with all this people into the land which the Lord has sworn to their fathers to give them. You shall give it to them as an inheritance. We made it. I hope that this full story can become all of our stories. So I'll stop there. And again,